to find really great options for deferring capital gains taxes. Don't let your failure to plan become your plan to fail, especially when the Deferred Sales Trust may be one of the best ways to exit your highly appreciated assets. You can continue to defer the capital gains taxes so you can continue to grow your wealth. I'm your host today, Jessica Lanning. I'm filling in for Brett Swarts. Each episode, we are joined by some of the leading wealth advisors, business folks, real estate experts, and leadership specialists to share their ideas, have them tell their deal stories, and share their inspiration so that together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Our next guest is transforming the way apartments are built and managed by incorporating technologies and efficiencies that have revolutionized other industries and lead to high quality, cost-effective projects. This has not always been easy. Just a few years into joining the family business, his dad passed away, leaving him without any knowledge of how to run a business. And through the School of Hard Knocks, which is one of the best educational institutions on the planet, he has found his way to success, improving the way we all live and the returns of his investors. Please welcome Mike Kaeding to the podcast. Welcome, Mike. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So please tell us a little bit more about your story and your current focus.
Yeah, so we are trying to change the way that housing is constructed and built with the goal of ultimately driving down the cost of housing. We believe we can reach a 50% reduction in cost. So imagine someday if your rent was half. Imagine if your mortgage was half. And it's been quite a journey in getting there. As you mentioned earlier in that story, my dad originally started the business. And within a few years after joining, my dad unexpectedly passed away. And overnight, I had what felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I didn't know a lot. I was barely inexperienced. But what was interesting is that was sort of the key. Not having all of the traditional way we've done things enabled us to ask questions, to find out if there was a different way to do things. And in the construction world, it's very much a world of tradition. And so we started to change that tradition in ways that could help improve the quality and drive down the cost of housing. And over time, we believe we can work to solve America's housing shortage and affordability crisis.
I love it. So I want our listeners to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions, we believe that everybody lands on the planet with a special gift, a superpower, a unique ability, however you might want to look at that, because we all come onto the planet we like to believe, to help humanity and make the world a better place. So talk to us about what your special gift is. What's your superpower?
I think for me, it's been the capability of solving a variety of problems. Problem comes forth, big issue that we have in front of us, and just having the capability to understand the scope issues related to that problem and then work to solution. That's enabled us to tackle a variety of issues, everything from plumbing to technology to finance, across the gamut, to bring all this together into a system that works effectively moving forward.
So the topic for today's show is solving America's housing affordability crisis. And I know that's something that you've been working on in this company to make housing more affordable. And I also know you're bringing on investors to help be part of that process. So talk to us. Where's the company's focus right now? Where's your attention these days? How are you getting more investors? Talk to us about all that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll talk about our focus first, and then we'll talk about investors second. Right now, we're really heavily focused into improving the production system. What's interesting in the world of construction, we have a variety of stakeholders. Typically, you have an owner that owns the building. You have a general contractor that coordinates all the construction. You have a developer that finds a new site and puts that all together. You have subcontractors that do all the work, like the electricians, the plumbers, HVAC. Then you have a supplier that supplies materials for the site, and you have manufacturers produce those materials. One of the first things we did was take all of that in under one roof. So we own the buildings with the general contractor all the way down to we're manufacturing things like wall panels, precast concrete, so giant beams, columns, and planks that you see barreling down the highway, and they establish it all into a building. Even the supply chain, we have a team out in China and Mexico that source materials directly. But what's amazing is you bring all that under one roof, it enables us to start using techniques that other industries use. If you look at manufacturing, over the last 60 years, manufacturing has improved labor productivity by 760%. Agriculture has improved by 1,500%. Do you have any guess what construction has done?
I cheated because I've seen your video, but it's something phenomenally low, like 10%.
Yeah, it's essentially nothing. It's 10%. Good work. It's terrible. And so if we just partner with people in these other industries to apply the techniques and technologies that they've used into our own space, we see radical improvement. And so one group we're working with right now is Toyota, and they're helping us improve those systems. But what's crazy is because of those improvements, you can take a 16-month project and bring it down to 9 months. And one of the key ways that you can do that is by breaking the building into smaller chunks. So we look at a batch or a unit getting done. And right now, we are completing another apartment unit every 5 hours. At Toyota, they produce a car every 57 seconds, I think it is. So we still got a ways to go to get to that level. But in construction, I don't know anyone who's thinking about construction work this way. And it's incredible when you bring that kind of technology and those techniques in play, can make massive improvements. Now, on the investor side, the thing we found, found interesting is this past year or two, inflation has risen. And with rising inflation comes higher interest rates, which come where banks become more hesitant about loaning proceeds out. So our latest project is in Minnesota here. It's a $100 million building. Typically, a bank would fund $75 million of that. Our construction costs are around $68 million. So because our costs are already pretty low, banks are willing to fund more than the total cost of the project, which is amazing. But now banks are down at 55%. And so we're going and reaching out and finding investors to help bridge some of that gap in the future. And the way we're doing it is we're building on a platform. One thing we thought would be really interesting is, can we remove the bank and in some sense become the bank for end users? And so we're creating a platform right now. We're getting our approvals through the SEC, where it's not actually a bank, but it feels like a bank. You have an account, you can put money in, you can take money out. You get a rate of return that's higher than any bank account that you can get. And what's cool is we're giving the investors the cost that we would have paid to the bank. So the investor is getting not only their rate of return, but also all of the bank's profit. So we're cutting out the middleman and we're giving the investors that cash.
And so in this particular example, that means you need to raise the 100 million, or would you even have to raise more than that?
No, we don't need to raise 100 million. We need to raise enough for construction financing. So in this example, it's about 12 million. And that's what makes it a pretty interesting scenario, because it's fairly low risk because the costs are so low. If the value of the building drops by 20%, which is a pretty high margin in real estate, it's still valued at 80 million, which is more than all the capital we raised for that project.
Got it. And investors that are looking to invest in projects like yours, what do they look like? What are their demographics? Who's your target investor?
And this is what's really interesting. Most of the time, people are going to high net worth individuals, right? The ones that are accredited investors that have $200,000 a year in income, $1 million in assets, excluding their home. And it makes it so that real estate is sort of off limits to the vast majority of Americans. So one of the approaches that we decided to take to make it different is to get special approval through the SEC. It requires us to get audits. It requires us to have hundreds of pages of documents and stuff we got to submit to them. But once we get approval on that, we can then reach out and get any investor, any American can invest in the product. There's a limit that you can't invest more than 10% of your net income, but I would recommend that anyway for anyone out there. But it gives everyone access to that market that they may not have had access to in the past.
Got it. And talk to us a little bit about, look, it's somewhat counterintuitive to make construction of a vertical company, basically, right? To own
Absolutely.
all the implements along the way. It's counterintuitive to look for smaller investors. Do you feel like this is where your magic is going to happen? And how'd you get to this place?
That's exactly right. I think we literally look at everything that people are doing and we ask, why? Why? Is there a better way? I think fundamentally it came from my dad passing and realizing, like, I don't know a lot. Let's just start asking questions. So after my dad passed, one of the key things that first started is we had a plumber work with one of our buildings, and the plumber came back with their bid and doubled it from the prior project. It's like, I can't do this. I can't afford the amount that they're asking for. And so we started getting other bids and realizing other companies were even more expensive. So what do I do? Like, what do we do? What we ended up doing is buying a bunch of plumbing books and starting to study plumbing. And we were able to find a plumber that was willing to work with us. And so we partnered some of our team and part of some of his team. And we worked together to do the plumbing on this small building. And eventually that rolled over to us hiring our own master plumbers and a whole infrastructure underneath that. But it kind of came out of necessity in some regards. We just couldn't afford to pay the rates people were asking for.
What is that? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to find a way. But that's a lot of complicated things. So you've got to have electricians, and you've got to have people that can do plumbing, and you've got to have people that can do all aspects of putting, houses together. How do you keep track of all that complexity?
Well, a couple of things. First, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. There are so many new issues that we have to tackle every single day. It's a little overwhelming at times. And so you've got to have a mind and a capability to handle that. But I think more important than that is finding and hiring amazing people. And I don't just say that lightly. We actually look for the world's best, to the point where there are employees that work with us that we fly across the country every single week just to come to work. We have a few people out of Florida. We have a number of international people. In fact, probably about 30% of our staff are not local to the area. Wow. But when you have a bar that is that incredibly high that you find the very best people, magic happens. I'll give you one example of one of our team members. Steve Jobs announces the iPhone in 2007. He walks off of that stage, and on that same stage, one of our staff members who works for us now followed Steve Jobs up on that after that presentation with some stuff that he had to present with that group. But it's that sort of caliber of people. You bring that together, literally magic happens. I can step back and just watch amazing stuff go on.
And so, look, everybody's struggling to hire people these days, right? How do you attract that talent like that? What's making them want to come work for you?
Yeah, we had the same problem, and we were faced with the question: do we hire a warm body, or do we not fill the position? And we looked at that and said, "This is a terrible decision. Neither is a good option. We don't want either." So we went kind of extreme. We hired 14 recruiters. So we at the time we were about 150 people. So it was about 10% of our staff were recruiters. We realized that this is part of it, is reaching out, building those relationships with the best talent. And then I think another really very important part is building the right culture. I just came out of one of our orientation meetings this morning, and part of that orientation is our number one strategy is building a place that you love where you work. And I tell the team, we find the best people, and guess what? All of you have options. I know any one of you can walk out of here tomorrow and you can go work for any one of our competitors easily. And I said, every day I come into work, the leadership comes into work, we have to come in and earn the right for you to choose to work here. And so there's a lot of steps that we do to try to earn that. But all of our compensation is done in a way that anyone can leave tomorrow. There is no negative stigma around that. We encourage people to take calls from recruiters. And we do all of that because I want you to know your options and I want to have earned the right for you to be here.
Well, it makes a big difference when people choose to be at work rather than when they feel like they have to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. The performance is tenfold better.
Absolutely. And they also get to be part of something larger, is what it sounds like to me at your company. And just in terms of trying to solve an affordability crisis. When you are building these apartments or whatever this construction might be, what's your exit strategy? Is your plan to keep all of these units around and build a great big group of these, like, so that you always have them, or are you building them and selling them? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So right now it's build and hold is the strategy, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what it is long term. And I don't even think about it that way. The two things, if we're really boiling it down to two things that we're trying to do, one is to solve America's housing affordability. There's a second part I don't advertise quite as much because it's newer for us, but we're on this journey of trying to build the Apple of apartments, right? Or whatever brand that you love, the Disney of apartments, the Chipotle of apartments, but like the best of the best experience. And so we have a whole design team now, and we have a lead designer who's phenomenal, who they're thinking about every little detail to how much space is there for a chair so that your legs come up and don't hit the next thing in front of you. And like, how does that drawer pull out in such a way, or how is this laid out so that your experience as a renter is flawless? Or in another word, is magical. How do we up that experience? And so we will buy and hold to help support that strategy to create that amazing experience for the end customer. But there'll probably be at times certain buildings we have to sell for just financial reasons, but generally it's a buy and hold.
And for your investors, talk to us a little bit about how they then make their money. Are they making money off the rents that come off these buildings? How does that happen?
Yeah, so it feels a lot like a bank account. It is not actually a bank account. It's not FDIC insured. Please read all the legal disclaimers. But you put money in and then you earn an interest rate. And then you can lock your money for 3, 6, 9, 12, 24 months. And then you earn a higher interest rate. So that's how it feels from an investor standpoint. What we're actually doing with that is we take those cash, that capital, and that helps us bridge some of those gaps. For example, the $100 million project, we put 10 million of that capital into bridging that construction gap. And then it's our job on our we have a whole financial team, but it's the financial team's job to make sure that we're keeping a careful eye on withdrawals out of that system. And so, for example, if we get a lot of withdrawals for people that locked in a year, then we start looking at selling buildings so that we're properly recapitalizing the money that people are taking out. And that's why we encourage people we offer a higher rate for the longer terms. It gives us some foresight and gives us opportunity to sell buildings as we need to return capital to investors.
And when you sell those buildings, are you doing 1031 exchanges? Or are you just generating cash?
Ooh, great question. Yeah, we do 1031 exchanges, and there's been a lot of pain points with that.
Yeah. What's your biggest frustration with the 1031 exchange?
The amount of paperwork, the amount of time, and the expense related to all of it. One of the challenges we have is that we do a 1031 exchange into new buildings. And because of that, we have to set up whole new entities to make all of that work. And then there's a lot of strict timelines, and we have to deploy so much capital in such a limited timeline. It's a pain.
Yeah, it's a pain. Here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions, we're working with clients all the time that have highly appreciated assets, and they'd love to exit. They'd love to get out of, especially with real estate, get out of tenants and trash and toilets and the management of all of that, and to be able to take all those gains and be able to roll them over into another, either a 1031 exchange property, right, or some other alternative, so that they don't have to pay the capital gains taxes on that, at least not right now, and they can continue to grow their wealth. And those deadlines are a killer, and gathering all that information in a short period of time, really tough. And people are having to buy properties or other assets that they probably wouldn't otherwise buy just because of the time frame. Super painful, it feels like, for everybody, which is why we love the Deferred Sales Trust. It's what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. As you as a listener want to learn more about that, please come to landingfinancial.com. I'm Jessica Lanning. That's my website. I'm a financial planner. Or you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Mention that you heard this podcast, and we'd love to have a conversation with you if you have a highly appreciated asset that you would like to sell. All right. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Your favorite book that you've read or gifted in the past year?
No Rules by Reed Hastings.
Oh, okay. Give me a little snippet of your favorite takeaway.
It's about hiring amazing people and then reducing rules and empowering them to make the decisions that's right for them in their part of the business.
Nice. All right. Your favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Management serves the employees, and if we do that right, they'll serve the customers. The management that focuses only on the customers and excludes the employees gets neither right.
Nice. Okay, imagine you could go back in time. What would you tell your 25-year-old self?
That there's going to be some really tough challenges, but to know that putting the tenacity and energy into those challenges, you'll get through and solve those issues.
What are you most curious about right now?
Boy, that's a really great question. I'm really curious to see how inflation and the whole COVID whiplash has been kind of meandering through the economy.
It's a popular curiosity, let me tell you. You've had a lot of great success in your career. What is the one habit that you try to practice daily or weekly, which helps you stay centered in your values and keeps you moving toward new goals?
Boy, for me, it's about having a clear routine so that I don't have to think about the basics. So for me, I always make sure I get enough sleep. I do a 15-mile run every Sunday. The workouts, just those elements I always keep constant in my life, so that way I can stay well grounded, so that I can be more effective during work.
Excellent. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts or strengths, of problem solving. Tenacity is what I heard today, to be a blessing and a help to others. Okay, for those listeners who want to get in touch with you, what's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, you can visit our website, which is norhart.com. That's NORHART.com.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up the show. I want to thank you, the listener, for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. We believe that high net worth individuals and their professional teams shouldn't struggle to find great options for deferring capital gains taxes. Don't let your failure to plan become your plan to fail, especially when the Deferred Sales Trust might be the very best way to exit your highly appreciated assets and defer the capital gains taxes so that you can continue to build your wealth. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Mike, for being on the podcast.